dimension, directly engaging with social and ecological issues such as prostitution, urban poverty, crime, environmental degradation, and technological transformation. In the poem The Eighth-Day Tibetan of 2009, for instance, she reflects on artificial intelligence and the prospect of a post-human future beyond human governance. In her most recent collection, 传承季末日脚本 of 2022, okay. In English is Total Immersion Apocalypse Script. She arrives to ask herself, in what form will the Earth die? So if we read her trajectory as a whole, we could identify four major phases. And here you have the phases: the Black Knight phase, the White Knight phase, the Ecofeminist phase, and the apocalyptic phase. Okay. It may be particularly productive to read Jia Yongming's poetry through the lens of a localized form of ecofeminism. Ecofeminism developed with a notable intensity in China. Between 1995 and 2005, we can even refer to an ecofeminist wave. This development, on the one hand, as Wan Ning observed, is due to the accelerated process of urbanization and severe ecological stress China was undergoing in those years. On the other hand, classical Chinese thought had long elaborated, sophisticated reflections on the relationships between human beings and the natural world. This intellectual background made eco-critical and ecofeminist theories particularly resonant in the Chinese context. That said, we should avoid simplistic equivalences. Modern ecofeminism is not a direct continuation of ancient wisdom, nor should Taoism be retroactively framed as an early environmental movement. Yet, the Taoist attitude toward nature, its search for harmony with the spontaneous order of the cosmos, its refusal of domination and competition, its valuation of withdrawal, humility, and simplicity, offer a meaningful conceptual horizon for imagining alternative models of care and resistance. Within this discussion, Wei Qingqi has proposed an influential comparative approach between ecofeminism and Taoism. Drawing on the Tao Te Ching, Wei emphasizes Lao Tzu's praise of weakness, fluidity, and humility. Lao Tzu encourages us to know the white yet remain black, to know the male yet remain female. Furthermore, the notion of Shuifa, the mysterious female, described as the generative valley from which all things arise, suggests that the feminine is not passive or subordinate, but creative, dynamic, and foundational. Thus, yin can be understood as an inclusive and transformative force capable not merely of opposing dominant structures, but of reshaping them from within. From this perspective, Wei Qingqi proposed to reactivate what she calls the way of yin in order to enable Western ecofeminism to move beyond strict dualism and to adopt a more androgynous relational vision. A related insight appears in Lu Shuyuan's reflections on traditional Shanshui poetry. He characterizes landscape poetry as feminine, insofar as it constructs a symbolic refuge from dominant power structures. Many of Shanshui authors, for example, Tai Yuanming, withdrew from official life in search of harmony with nature. Thus, writing itself becomes a subtle yet persistent form of resistance. Seen from this perspective, Jia Yongming's poetry can be situated within this localized ecofeminist trajectory. Her emphasis on yin, fluidity, vulnerability, and care resonates deeply with this way of yin, where the feminine is not marginal or oppositional, but a transformative principle capable of reimagining the relationship between body, society, and planet. Water, traditionally associated with yin, occupies a central place in Jai's poetics. From the perspective of the way of yin and in dialogue with the feminine dimension of traditional Shanshui poetry. Sorry, here I have something in the middle. Okay, I'm sorry. I lost my point. Okay. I was saying I was speaking about water in the works of Jia Yongming. I was saying that water becomes not merely an image, but a structuring principle. Just two examples from the collection of Nuren of 1986. Here she say in monologue, Dubai, that it's a poem in the collection Nuren, she said, I quote, "I'm soft like a body of white feathers made of water. You hold me in your hands and I contain the world." And in another poem called Evidence, Jamil, she say, "Water chains me, water paints everywhere, the color of solitude, it cannot make me fixed." In another poem, Shuizhong de Didi, of 1998, water becomes emotional depth and ethical horizon. The poem is dedicated to a male figure, a younger brother, who may not be a blood relative, but rather an alter ego, a double, or perhaps a departed friend. The poem opens with the lines, I quote, "Water contains a whole room of blue waves and a trace of sorrow. Water is at once vast and intimate, holding space and feeling together, reflecting what we might call yin qualities, fluid, inclusive, capable of holding contradiction without violence." The water slowly rises over the brother's body through repetitive, almost ritualistic verses. I'm going to read it in Chinese because it's much more better than my English, and then you can feel the sound of these verses. Maybe here I have the Chinese one. Ah, no. Okay. 水呀，淹过了我脚趾，水呀，淹过了我脚趾，水呀，淹过了我膝盖。Okay, in English, water has covered my toes, water has covered the heels, water has covered the knees. This creates an hypnotic effect, suggesting transformation and loss. Something or someone is slowly submerged. Memory, perhaps, or a loved one. It evokes intimacy, fusion, but also suffocation. Water symbolizes the unconscious memory and time that submerge us. The immersion is gradual, not violent. In a Taoist framework, water is generative and receptive, absorbing without erasing. Okay. This dreamlike underwater dimension is also explored in another of Jai's poems, The Sadness of Submarine, written at the end of 90s during a stay in Dalian as a typhoon was approaching. On that occasion, she saw an abandoned submarine, which became the central metaphor of this poem, representing the condition of poetic writing in an era when poetry has been marginalized. The poet asks, I quote, "As you can see, now I have built the submarine, but where is the water? Now I must build the water." Here, water is the necessary condition for movement, depth, and meaning. If the submarine represents the poetic self, then water represents the emotional and ethical medium in which that self can truly exist. The poet must not only construct the vessel of introspection, but must also generate the surrounding element, the space of sorrow, resonance, and relation within which poetry can move. Water, therefore, becomes an act of creation. To build water is to create the conditions for empathy. In her recent collection, 全全寂寞热胶本, Total Immersion Apocalypse Script of 2022, 沉浸 immersion becomes central. The term, composed of two water radicals, is borrowed from video game language. Total immersion means losing contact with ordinary reality. From this new reality, she asks again, I quote, "In what form will the earth die? It will certainly be a desolate magnificence." The oxymoron Chichu and Zhuan Li that you can see in the Chinese version, desolate and magnificent, expresses empathy for the earth that is a suffering body. She refuses prophecy. She said, I quote, "I wish to be a witness, not a prophet." So observations becomes care. Here you have some of the images Jia Yongming decided to include in her collection, but they are not drawn by herself. They are drawn by a friend. Okay, these are, as you can see, these are all related with water or something like this, something that seems water. Okay? The same poetics of water appears in her painting and photography. As Shubin observed, her works are still related to her poetry. Her paintings are very much like her poems. And Jai herself admits, after learning to paint, I feel that my vision, my imagination, and my perception have opened up greatly. Okay. Here you have some posters from her painting exhibitions where, as you can see, water plays a central role. The last one is from a photography exhibition, and although it is not immediately recognizable, it shows the mirrored surface of a lake. You can see the insect and the trees in the surface of this lake. Okay. Here you have some of her work, her paintings, and photograph related with water. Some of them you had already seen in the other part of the PPT. This is a photograph. Okay. 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 And here you have the image of Jai navigating the Fuchun River in Zhejiang, chosen to promote the documentary 文学的故乡 Season 2. These lines are from the long poem of Sui Huanggongwan, Yo Fuchun Shan. Here you have the poem, and I'm gonna read it, and here you have the translation. Okay. 远山近岸 村庄小路，四座山峰，两片水域，次第在我眼前展开。我在未来的时间里，走在过去的山水间。Here you have the translation in English. And here, as you can see, and we talk about it all the morning, she reinterprets the literati ideal of poetry, calligraphy, and painting, as they are the three perfections in a postmodern key. To conclude, I would like you to listen to Jia Yongming's reading Shen Lan Ban Dian, that is a poet from her recent collection, the most recent collection, 全层寂寞热胶本, Total Immersion in the Apocalypse Script. And I put some of, sorry. Oh. I put the, as you can see, I put the subtitles, but they are, if you cannot understand Chinese, maybe they are a little bit problematic because the poet has a strong accent of Sichuan, of Chengdu, so there are a lot of mistakes, but even like that, you can understand more or less the meaning. And here you have my translation of some lines very significantly of the poem. So I'm gonna put the video. Oh, here.
大家好，我是白永明。南都读书月为你读诗。我下面要为你们读的一首诗叫《深蓝斑点》，是我的新世纪全沉浸末日脚本里面的一首。我写这首诗是因为我曾经在一个新闻上看到，在太空里面拍摄宇宙的照片里，地球只是宇宙里面的一个深蓝斑点，非常非常小的一个斑点。所以有的时候我想起人类在这么小的一个深蓝斑点上有那么大的野心，也是一个非常讽刺的事情。那下面我给大家读这首诗。深蓝斑点，太空尘埃中最小的一粒，最小尘埃中最小的那一颗，也找不到我们人类的身影。一粒尘埃也想爆发巨大能量，就像芸芸众蚁也仰望星空。蚂蚁也梦想建立巨大王朝。他们眼中的王朝洞口，一入浩瀚宇宙中的黑洞，漩涡深处是无法理解的能量与秘密。 那射进血液里的一丝阳光，便是天庭来降的无限电梦。从太阳系看过去，天空有太多的条纹，地球就坐落在那些光线里。那是旅行者号回望地球时看到的深蓝斑点，渺小如尘埃。它小于一个像素点，我们就居住在这个深蓝斑点上。数万亿颗恒星中一个小小协议，谁会在意？数千亿内外太空中还有数不清的恒星，我们就住在宇宙背景中，那小小斑点上的小小一屑中。宇宙背景之外，是否还有更多重宇宙？这是小小蝼蚁不可认知的地区。宇宙也许只是外宇宙的一粒深色斑点。我们居住在宇宙一粒深蓝斑点上，比1厘米更小的斑点。我们居住在这里，孕育、生长、繁衍、扩张、买卖、杀戮、竞争、抢掠，乐此不疲，前仆后继。我们以为地球是为人类而造，不过当我们拿起手机显示屏，拂去灰尘，在更遥远、更深邃的地方，也有某种形态准备佛掉这一粒不起眼的深蓝尘粒。谢谢。
下载视频 APP N 种方式。
Okay, thank you very much for your kindly attention. Grazie, 谢谢. Okay, I finished.
Okay, thank you so much. This is very intensive. Any questions?
Yeah, it was very interesting, and I think I'm interested in the poetry of the shy young Min, but maybe I have a question again to Lavinia. Please explain me once more the term ecofeminism.
Okay, what does it mean?
Yeah, what does it mean? I heard
Okay.
it for the first time. This word is very new for me.
Okay, maybe my English is not enough to explain it, but I'm gonna try it, okay?
Yes.
Okay, may I say it's a fusion between eco-critic and feminism, and it's a way to understand the position, the relative position, and the how can I say it? I have the word here.
Yeah, so there are two terms, ecology and feminism, right?
Yes,
Ecology.
but I have a term here and I cannot think about it. I don't know why. Because when I mix the no, non mi viene proprio il termine.
Ah, ecco.
I cannot think about the anyway, I'm gonna say it in another way. Yes, the position of women between the society and the position of nature in the relationship between men and nature is that doesn't mean that women are more related with nature, but is a way to compare the how do you say that? I need this word.
Subjugation.
Bravo. Yeah. position of women. And this ecofeminism is a term that is borrowed from the 74 book of Françoise de Bonne, that is a theorist of ecofeminist. And this line of thought, these studies are very developed in China. And also because of the Taoist position of feminine, this is all an interpretation of feminine in the Tao Te Ching that is generative, as I said, is not, say again this word, is not passive, but is
subjugated.
Subjugated, thank you, position, but as in yin yang relationship is a form, as Weixinxi say, is a perfectionated form of yang, because is more inclusive than yang that is oppositional. So this is more or less the ecofeminism direction of Chinese studies. I don't know if I explained it well.
But we can't or should not separate yin and yang, because they are together, and only together we are in harmony. But of course, maybe if you think men, maybe they destroy nature, and women maybe they save nature. So it's a kind of difference, but both parts must come together. We have the begriff, the term matriarchat. I don't know to say it in English, matriarchat. So matriarchat. So in old Asian countries, even in China and Japan as well, we have this matriarchats. I visited early places in China, in Mudu. There's all this kind of matriarchat as well to recognize. And even in Japan, you have the goddesses, sun goddess and so on.
Yeah, I'm not very. Yeah, I'm not very sure that I understand, because, as I said, my English is not very good. But the question is not to separate yin and yang, but to adopt a yin perspective. Okay, that is different from separated. In Chinese philosophy, it doesn't exist dualism. It doesn't mean that yin is a female and yang is a man. This is not the problem. The problem is to apply a yin position that is more, as I said, more fluid and more comprehensive. On the opposite, yang, I cannot say on the opposite, but in another way, yang is more competitive and oppositional. So this is the meaning of Weixinxi, to comparate ecofeminism with Taoism. And she said that the Taoism vision could perfectionate Western ecofeminism.
Okay, I will think about later by my own.
But I'm sure that if I can use Italian, we can speak about it a lot. But really, my English is not enough, maybe, to debate philosophical questions.
You see,
maybe Chinese.
In the Tao Te Ching, Lao Tzu says that the water is the much more flexible and maybe the element that overpowers the strong yang, and so the perspective of yin is more successful.
Okay.
That's a key point in Taoism in this way. But we have another question of Selusi. Is it right pronounced?
Yeah, Selusi, it's fine.
Selusi,
It's fine. Perfectly fine. Thank you. So mine is just a very short follow-up from what you were saying about eco-criticism, since eco-criticism really is this spreading from the concept of the analysis of power in feminist perspective, and to apply this kind of analysis of power streaming from Foucault, for instance, Michel Foucault, analysis of power in terms and languages and in the way of analyzing anything. So it's not really to keep a feminist or a female perspective on nature, but it's more just to use those instruments, so those epistemological instruments, just to analyze a very different context. So it's not has to do really with feminist perspective. The second thing that I want to say is a comment on what you just presented, Lavinia, and I particularly liked one point. So one expression that you presented is to build water. So to build through water and build water, and the connection of this idea of water as a building material, but is a building material of relations, since you need to build water in order to have empathy. Empathy based on the building of water. So if you can just say something more, just get back to this very nice poem, I would love to hear something more from you.
Thank you very much, Selusi. You kept the point that in this poet, she is very frustrated because poetry has been marginalized in at that time in Chinese context. So she said, now I built my consciousness. I built myself. I know who I am, but there's no place where I can have relation with the others. So the as my interpretation, I don't know if my interpretation is correct, but the submarine in this poem is herself, has consciousness, has feeling to be a female and a female poet. And the water is the way, as I said, the way of yin, the way to be, to share her consciousness, her feelings with the other human beings. So she has to construct, because there's no way she can navigate with her submarine. I think this is more or less the interpretation of this poem, that this water is a form of relation with the others, that is where her submarine can navigate in the world and can feel the empathy. Here is the ecofeminist perspective. This is not that the female has to be more powerful than men, or bigger than men, or more opposite, or better than men, but to have, she say, we are all male and female. We are all the same humanity, the same nature, if we can see in this way. So water is the best metaphor to explain this relation, this war we are, where we are all immersed, I think. I don't know if I've been clear. Thank you.
Okay, thank you so much. We are at the last topic for today, as far as I can see, right, Giacomo? And so
yes, it's the last one, because the last two, they're not here. So
okay, so it's your turn. Selusi, right? Pronounced?
Yeah, it's me, Selusi. I started with sharing my screen. So, yeah, here I am.
Okay, maybe first of all you can
introduce yourself. I will introduce myself. So I'm Selusi Ambrogio. I teach Chinese philosophy and Chinese literature at the University of Macerata in central Italy. And I'm currently Deputy Rector for Extra-European International Relations, and I was the former president of the European Association for Chinese Philosophy. And for instance, here I just inserted one of the work that I have edited for Bloomsbury with a colleague of mine. That is the largest history of Chinese philosophy published so far in any Western languages, authored by 70 people that I edited with my colleague. And I'm quoting this because in the last volume I discussed the ecological perspective in the Chinese philosophical system. So in the last volume, I tried to open the discussion on the role of Chinese philosophy in a really intercultural, international ecological perspective and ecological reflection, which is usually very Western oriented, Western guided, also the ecological discourse, internationally speaking, and about laws and whatever is guided with a very classical anthropocentric and subject-centered perspective. And so what I'm trying to do today is to try to engage more than to present Chinese philosophy, which is impossible to do in 30 minutes or 20 minutes in this case, but try to engage with some concepts raising from Chinese philosophy and particularly from Taoism. And so I start with that. If you want to have any other information about myself, you can just Google about myself and find my university web pages. So I started from this question, really, does water act? So I was asking myself, I was working on action, I'm working on agency, specifically speaking. And so I try to give all the time to this discourse, which, as I said, is very Western oriented and more intercultural and environmental perspective. And so an intercultural environmental reflection together with you on the way to tackle with water as an agent. So the idea that natural elements are inert is highly anthropocentric, and we still do not completely understand the anthropocentric nature of most of our perspectives over nature and over everything which is beyond humans, and poses nature as a stock of exploitable goods. So in the discourse on agency, we can find at least 3 principles about how to define agency and an agent. So the first aspect has to do with interactivity and with relationality. So interactivity and relationality with the environment in a kind of reciprocal influence. So I collect data and I react to data which I take from the environment. And so I react to the environment and I change the environment. So, and I try to create, this is the second principle, an autonomy in creating this change of the environment and to tackle with the environmental constraints, and so to go beyond those constraints. And the third point in the definition of agency is the adaptability to changes. And as you will see, I will try to present water as presenting these 3 principles about a definition of agency. So studies as schematize 7 possible forms of agency, just very recent studies. So the first one is natural agency, and I find that this kind of list is based on a top-down perspective, so where the human is at the top and where natural agency is down. I try to invert this perspective, just putting natural agency at the first point and the first aspect, but it has also to do with complexity, since this list of possible forms of agency is based from the simplest to the most complex, and I will try again to invert this perspective. So natural agency, biological agency, so the agency of animals and plants, social animal agency, so the agency of group of animals mostly, and here we have another very lacking aspect, that is the social agency of plants, for instance, it is still quite lacking in the system. The artifactual agency, so of elements created by humans for specific functions, and we have in our houses many artifactual agents. Human agency and social human agency, and at last has been added this AI or advanced technology agency in this list. So what about natural agency? So how natural agency is usually described as natural actions. Sorry? You cannot see the slide moving.
The slides are not changing for us. Yeah.
So this happens quite often with Teams, that the slides do not move. So I try to share them again, otherwise I will not use. Do you see the slide moving or not?
Oh, now we see the natural agency slide, but it's not changing.
No, it's not changing.
Oh, still not changing. So I will just keep to making the slides as large as possible without putting them in projection. Natural actions are not oriented towards objectives according to this definition of natural agency. Natural agency is without conatus. This is coming from Spinoza's definition. So it strives to preserve. So it strives to preserve, persevere in its being is the definition of conatus in Spinoza. So natural agency, so the agency of water, for instance, it should be without conatus, so without this idea of perseverance in its being. Does not elaborate information, does not remember or learn from experience, suggests that physical laws, so the analysis of natural agency suggests that physical laws can create regular and organized behavior without a will, so is will-less, of course, nature. And so in this system of analysis, they analyzes the rivers. So for instance, as autoregulative flux, a dynamic balance, cycles of retractions with other ecosystems, geological impacts. And so, and analyzing the agency of rivers, they say they lack memory, learning, experience, and cannot change their behavior partners. So this is the classical definition of natural agency, something I will try to somehow change as a perspective. So there is a residual question, of course, in this definition of agency. There is could this insistence, for instance, on a lack of consciousness when dealing with those kind of natural agents or animal agency, or any agency which is not connected to humans, just to let you understand what I want to say. So this why to dealing with beyond humans agencies be acknowledged as a clear residual form of anthropocentrism. So if we want to analyze some elements in the aspects of water agency, we might say is a flux, as a few of you already said today. It is flux and it creates fluxes. So it creates something. We know that water has an origin somehow, so from reserves of hydrogen in the original material which created Earth as it is. It changed behavior according to its shapes and conditions, and it still does today. So it has a kind of origin and perseveres in its own existence and in the maintenance. So I want to say it has a conatus in the end. Water shaped and ceaselessly shapes the environment, so it acts on the environment, and it even, we might say, is, in the interaction between seas and moon, creates cycles which regulates the whole life on Earth. So seasons, day, night, temperature, fertility. So we might say that water on the planet, it creates time on Earth, or at least together with the sun, the water creates the time on Earth. So together with the heating of the sun. Water and oxygen are the sources of any life on the planet. And there are also experiments which are quite debatable about the memory of water. So Masaru Emoto, very famous Japanese expert of the science of water and of medicines, tried those kind of experiments, trying to suggest a memory of water, so a memory without a will, so a kind of chemical memory. So we also know that about the mass of the Earth, that about 71% of the Earth's surface is water, and 78% of the animal biomass is hosted in marine environments, so within water. However, 86% of Earth biomass is located on land, and it's made of plants. So we might say that the couple water and plants are the real conditions. So plants and water together with the sun rays, of course, are the couple or the triangles or the trimurti, if you want to move from the Indian system of life on the planet. So they have a kind of agentic nature. Getting to the Tao Te Ching, I selected a kind of quite well-known passages from the chapters of the Tao Te Ching, where we have the expression of the role of the way in which water is presented within these very relevant texts. And it says the highest good is like water. Water brings good to all things and does not contend. It goes to places which most people detest, and is therefore akin to Dao. So, 寄与道. Another passage, very relevant, rivers and seas are the kings of all waters, because they love to stay in lowly places. That is why they are the kings of all waters, because they are low. They prefer to stay low. Thus, if the sage wants to lead from the top, he must promise to place himself at the bottom. If he wishes to lead from the front, he must place himself in the back. In this way, the sage is placed at the top, and yet the common people do not feel the weight. He is placed in front, and yet the common people do not feel any feat. Thus the whole world gladly supports him and never gets tired of him, just because he does not contend. So the wise man does not contend against the other. No one in this world can contend with him. So can contend with this wise man who is like water. Another chapter, nothing in this world is softer than water, yet nothing can better attack the strong than water, for nothing can replace it. That the weak can subdue the strong, and the soft can subdue the foe. No one is in this world does not know. 莫不知, yet no one can put it into practice. So nobody is really able to be like water, or at least it's very hard to be like water. Zhuangzi also uses in several of his passages the expression of water, but he mostly uses water as a metaphor of the stillness of the mind, so of a kind of ascetic perspective on water. So he says, people do not mirror themselves in running water, so in moving water, but in still water. So this idea of water as a stillness in Zhuangzi, while in Laozi we have a much more dynamic way of perceiving and reading water as power, so as a strong power. we know that water is strictly connected to the idea of qi. So the way to understand water is connected to this vital energy, vital flux, vital breath. So where water is connected to energy and connected to the breathing activity. So for instance, in one of the classic of the feng shui, we have this idea that in the burial, one takes advantage of the vital qi. When the qi of the yin-yang is exhaled, it ascends and becomes clouds, descending as rain. So we have strongly this idea of the energy presented specifically as water. And this is an energy that is a completely circulating energy of the earth. So the earth cannot be unconnected to this vital qi, which is actually water. It is not just that water is a metaphor in this case of power, but qi is the water, and the water is action. So this qi completely enframes the concept of power in this system and present this idea of the energy that the humans and that any living beings can get from the earth. And this energy is precisely this very waterly concept. So water in Taoism is a kind of twofold. Since we have water as metaphor of the state of the mind, like in Zhuangzi, but also in some of Laozi or Dao De Jing passages. But we also as, specifically in the Dao De Jing, this idea of water as a model of agency, not just as a metaphor, but really as an agent that we should imitate. So a model of doing well, a model of being well or well-being within the world. So this is the qi dao, so the way of the qi. So this idea of qi dao as living and acting, so this is the idea of cultivating and harmonizing one's vital energy, so our qi, living in accordance with the natural flow of the universe. It is also the respiratory or energetic channels of the body. So we are qi, so we are water. We live in accordance with our waterly nature, energy nature. So practices, for instance, as breathing techniques, as meditation, so the water metaphor, as qi gong, so any qi connected actions and performance, and internal martial arts are all expression of this agent, a water agent within ourselves. So, and it is strictly connected, strongly connected with the water and this concept of water. I take here Braidotti as an expression of post-humanist perspective. So I started my presentation suggesting that the way we analyze non-human or beyond human agents, so their agency is strictly anthropocentric. And so we should have a kind of intercultural and post-human turn in order to understand the quality of beyond human agency. So Braidotti suggests this constrains the tyrannic nature of humanism understood as anthropocentrism. A revindication of a new open subject made of relations and interactions of potentia and potentia and at the same time of conatus, without a hierarchy of values. So she says, we currently need an enlarged, distributed and transversal concept of what a subject is and how it deploys its relational capacities. The presentation before mine was about water as building material of relations, really. So this idea of water as an example, as a perfect instance of relationality. So moving beyond this humanist or anthropocentric exceptionalism, subjectivity has to include the relational dependence on multiple non-humans and the planetary dimension as a whole. So we need a flows and distributed process as the image of the subject, according to this post-humanist perspective. And this idea of a flows distributed perspective is very waterly. So extremely connected to a very water perspective on the subject. So water agency as a reconfiguration of agency. I'm going to my conclusions. So a water agency as a reconfiguration of the concept of agency, in my view. So the ongoing discourse on agency and related classification as the one that I presented at the beginning of my speech in a list of 7 different agencies, is still based on a strongly human perspective and analyzing the human as the most perfectionate and the most refined, the most complete agent in the list. So this very human perspective is an individualistic and mind or will guided perspective on the concept of agency, which completely making possible a re-understanding of the concept of action. So as I will say in just a minute now. So watering, here I'm trying to use metaphorically the concept of water. So watering, the agent, is to disclose the co-agentic nature of actions. Water could not be water, for instance, without heating, so without a heat. So since the water could not change the different states without heating. So the action of water needs the action of the sun rays, for instance. Otherwise, water could not act. So water changes the environments and adapts to the environment at the same time. So it's very yin-yang perspective, since it changes and it changes. Beyond actions, so this suggests a perspective beyond actions versus passivity. So this opposition is completely misleading in the understanding of actions. Actions to be performed need both aspects, so activity and passivity, since one cannot be without the other. Not only the wise humans, or the Shenren, who wei, so not action or not imposing action, acts like water, but any actions, presumably based on free will, is like the action of water, because pure will is illusory. Any action is co-acted, an adaptation to the environment and the change imposed to the environment at the same time. Uai, philosophical concept, is not non or anti-action, but the awareness of the non-individual or non-subjective nature of action. So swim as water swims. The human, which are actually made 65% made of water. So the human swimming within a waterly environment is water swimming in water, who swims by following the course of the current, acts with the water, and becomes part of the water's collective action of being water. The human being is but one of the states of water while he's swimming or she's swimming within the water flags. So coact, like nature, and particularly water coact, Taoism does not ask the human beings to relinquish their existence as agents. In Taoism, we have this idea of way. So act while not imposing your action, but not don't act. So the human beings do not need to relinquish or to reject their existence as agents, but rather to conceive of their actions from the proper perspective, from a correct perspective. So for instance, if we look at Buddhist Pratitya Samutpada, so the codependent arising, so this very relevant concept which had strong influences, not just in the Buddhist Chinese setting, but also in Confucianism and New Confucianism, and in all the, from the Song Dynasty to contemporary way of understanding reality, the ontology of reality. So this Pratitya Samutpada, so this codependent arising, is not merely an ontological, so we are made in the same arising, so codependently with others, or an epistemological perspective. So in order to correctly understand our existence, we need to understand that we are co-created or codependent, but it's also practical, so connected to action concept about agency and awareness of the illusion of the subject agent. It's not just we are not an individual, but our actions are co-actions. Water, so, is a model of agency. It's not just a metaphor within Taoism. This water as a model of agency washes away the claim to a superior form of agency. So a claim that ultimately destroys action itself and the human being's ontological co-belonging with the cosmos. So a proper reconfiguration of the ontology of the self and of agency constitutes the foundation of a coherent environmental thought. I thank you very much for your attention, really.
Oh, thank you so much. This is really very important and dense thought you share with us, and maybe it's a good closing for our symposium today, which was very rich and good, filled up with good discussions. But first of all, any questions to him? For me, one thought is very interesting because I've never mentioned it. You said that water needs the heat, and I haven't thought about this, but it's really true because without heat, it's just ice, you know, and that you need the heat. You can also say the fire to bring up water to life is very interesting. Great thought, in my opinion.
So usually philosophers are there just for saying very basic and obvious concepts, but just raising new awareness on very basic and obvious concepts. So this is our rules, more or less.
Yes. So it summarized some thoughts we had in these or others before, and in my opinion, we figured out on this day that water is really, from the Taoist concept, maybe the most important. But on the other hand, just as you said, without heat, it doesn't come to life, you know. And so we are back. We return to this truth that no yin without yang, no yang without yin. That's it, you know, and that's the basic of the principle of Chinese painting to Giacomo, right? Shanshui is a symbol, not just a subject we paint, but to feel it in yourself, to find the balance between the elements. That's the way of painting, the way of philosophy, the way of life in a Chinese manner, right?
Yeah, we have always a very big problem in translating the concept of Shanshui as landscape, since landscape is immobile, unchanging, and completely lose the yin-yang dimension. And so, yeah, landscapes is a very misleading concept in translating Shanshui as a concept which is much more powerful, since Shang is certainly the yang dimension, while Shui the yin, but at the same time each of the two need the other. So yeah, it's true. I agree with you.
Thank you once more. You have a question, Karolina.
I have a question. How would you explain the relationship of the terms co-agency and codependency? Because it's really interesting what you were saying, you know, and kind of like it's a lot of that is quite new to me, you know, so I'm still processing, but it's like one thing that I'm trying to grasp, and I'm thinking you could probably do it in a very neat and nice way. And another question is a very small question, and I don't mean it as catching it on words, but I was really curious why you use the phrase pure will is illusory and not free will is illusory, which, you know, how, you know, why did you choose, you know, if it was like a conscious choice, as I'm saying, I don't want to pick you on words, but if it was a conscious choice, then why pure will, not free will?
So I start from the codependency, co-agency. I might say that co-agency is the in my view, these are two concepts which are one the other face of the other. So a kind of two faces of the same coin. See, the codependency is the ontological perspective, while the co-agency is the practical perspective. So while codependency is the condition of the action, co-agency is the understanding of the action as streaming from a codependent condition. Was I clear?
Yeah. Thank
Okay.
you.
So the second, I always have a personal, so this is maybe not linguistic, this is personal. I have a personal problem with the concept of free will, since I'm not somebody supporting the existence of free will. So I wanted to be clearly understood in such a short way that with free will, I was not just understanding this idea of free or unfree will, but this idea of will as a brain, as something which is streaming from in brain, consciousness, and so as a brain production. And so that's why I oscillated between these two terms, since I didn't want to raise the question free will or a kind of slave will or the typical theological issue. So I wanted just to keep me outside of this, since this is completely another argument on the table. And I wanted to, so I'm more for pure will than for free will in this perspective. So a pure will, of course, we have a will, but our will is, in my view, codependent. So this idea of pure will as somebody just choosing as he or she can choose any possibilities or any possibility without being completely dependent on the environment, on the relations, on what is also the side or aimed by others is, in my view, completely misleading.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
More questions? Okay, so far, thank you so much. Giacomo, maybe you want to say some closing words for us?
Yes, sure. Thank you everybody for all the amazing contribution to this symposium, and so I'm plan to do a collection of the proceedings symposium. So later anyway, I'm gonna send an email with details. Anyway, I think maybe in a couple of months I can receive your articles if you are willing to publish. And now, like last time, let's see where we can publish it. Last time we published within the magazine, like a special number of the magazine, and then I found a way to print it. Let's see if I can find some better, more broad platform to spread it more. I don't know. And also if somebody of you, of course, or some other way, I'm open to all kind of question. And now in chat, anyway, I think most of you already know. Anyway, in chat, I will write the website of Shanshui project, so you can navigate and see what we do, and the magazine, of course. And if anybody of you wants to participate in the magazine with some articles, more than welcome to send me. It's like every 4 months, so there is no pressure and everything. And yeah, so this was very, very nice, and we all in some way attracted by the Chinese culture and the Chinese vision. Taoism clearly out as the main river, the main way of flowing of our ideas in different aspects. And yeah, it was great. Thank you very much. And I hope we have more next time for a third symposium in the future. Thank you very much.
Thank you, and
Thank you.
have a nice day,
Thank
nice
you.
evening.
See you.
Bye-bye.
Good night for the people in
Bye.
China, and have a good day for the people in Europe.
Bye.
Bye.
Thank you very much.